On the road, in the gym, at a coffee house. No matter where you listen, this is Prevention Perk. I'm Steve Miller with Mid-America PTTC. It's time to perk up our prevention efforts. My guest today is Laura Morris, who has blended her passion for theater and the arts with community building and substance use prevention. Laura's work is founded in helping youth make healthy decisions through ongoing preventative, interactive programs on such topics as bullying, addictions, suicide, tobacco prevention, and others. Laura currently is project director for Be the Influence, a drug-free community grant in the state of Maine. She is certified as a national leadership prevention trainer, as well as a motivational speaker and CADCA prevention graduate. Hello, Laura, and welcome to Prevention Perk.
Hello, Steve Miller, and not the Steve Miller from the Steve Miller Band.
I never thought about that. What a coincidence.
Yeah.
So glad that you're here. I always like to start in the same fashion. How in the world did you get into doing what you're doing? What was your path to the prevention work that you do today?
Yeah, that's a great question because it was a path for sure. Well, what happened is I've always loved theater. So even as a young gal growing up in Boston, Massachusetts, I've always done theater, and I went to school for it. And then I was a professional actress at the Dallas Theater Center for a while and some other venues until you get to the point where you're having like some success and good success, but you think, do I want to be a waitress too for the rest of my life? So you get real jobs. And I went into sales for many, many years, and I found that theater really helped a lot of what we were doing in terms of how do we breathe life into however we speak. And it hooked people. And so when my son was 2 years old, living in Jefferson City, Missouri, believe it or not, I used to live there for about 23 years, Columbine had just happened. And we were just all so upset about how horrific it is that bullying could cause this kind of behavior. And I remember my friends and I were just discussing, like, someone's got to do something. We've got to educate youth on bullying and how to identify it, and then what to do if you are bullied, or if you witness bullying, or if you're the target of bullying, or if you're the bully themselves. And my friend said, have you ever thought about creating a school program? Because they really need that. And at that point, I was kind of waning out on corporate life, and I wanted to get back into my theater roots. And so just on a whim, I wrote this with my wonderful theater partner, BB Heil, who lives in North Carolina. Oh, no, she's back in Florida now. She moves a lot in Florida. And we wrote a couple of scripts. One was on respectful behavior called Respect, and another one was called Mission Possible, Solving the Crime of Bullying. And so I just applied for this grant randomly, a Title II grant, got $80,000. And immediately we just started a part-time nonprofit organization called the Second Chance Foundation, because we knew that theater could reach kids, hook them, they would remember the message, and then maybe teachers and everybody else could use it as identifiable ways to reduce bullying or whatever it was. So we would go to 300-400 schools a year in the Missouri area, and we just got huge, wonderful reviews. The kids really embraced it. The teachers embraced it. And we saw marked differences. Lots of schools would give us pre and post evaluations and just say, wow, like, we've been able to use this all year. And then we wrote a guide that went with it. And so that's how I started in prevention. And in the meantime, my friend BB was working for the Council for Drug-Free Youth there in Jefferson City, which is a drug-free community grant, and others. And so on top of what we were doing with Second Chance, which we had then gone on to do addiction assemblies and then tobacco prevention assemblies, and one on suicide prevention that I wrote with my friend Lucia Kinchelo. So we were always, whatever the need was, writing new scripts. We even wrote one at the Missouri State Archives called Molly and Dolores talk about the power of Missouri history. And that is still going on at the archives. But we just knew that theater reached people in a way that made them feel and change behavior. And so it made a whole lot of sense for it to be in prevention. And from there, we were doing directing for the Council for Drug-Free Youth. In fact, BB wrote a lot of those preliminary scripts that are still in town now. And this was back in 2000, years ago. And so we would direct youth to do these groups messaging peer to peer in all of the schools in the Jefferson City area on drug-free messaging. And it's become quite a thing, and definitely evidence-based, in that we've seen lots of changes over time with youth speaking to youth through the theater. So after that, I wanted to move back home, and this was about 7 years ago or so. And I'm from the New England area, so my family is in Maine. And I moved back to Maine as a director of a drug-free community grant, which is called Be the Influence. And that's where I presently am. And so I just pulled the arts and prevention with me. But above and beyond theater, really decided that every form of art reaches people. And so we've done quite a bit with art and music and dance and film, PSAs, and that kind of thing.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. The funder of this project, along with all the other products of the Mid-America PTTC, is the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. Although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. SAMHSA offers free downloadable publications and tip sheets, as well as mobile apps for youth, teens, and young adults on topics such as substance misuse, common mental health conditions, and coping with disasters and other traumatic events. You'll find a link for these resources in the show notes. Yeah, so you kind of got started, and from, as I hear you say, it was out of bullying and out of the crisis that happened in Colorado. Was it kind of organic? That, I mean, you've kind of shown that a little bit, but at some point you kind of aligned this life of art with, substance use and other risky behaviors, behavioral health issues. When did you really realize, though, that one could impact the other? Was that in the theater you were doing that, or did you realize that as kind of time went on?
Well, just from direct experience, we would teach theater camps as well, just general theater camps. And the kids would come in and they'd be kind of insecure and quiet and whatever it may be. But as you do these improvisational games, and then they get up on stage and they are affirmed by their audience, they really build self-esteem. And we realized just by doing theater with kids that it's a huge self-esteem builder. And so and I had, adult kids, once they'd grown up, come back to me and said, "Oh my gosh, like your programs or those programs really helped me to make important decisions in my life, or to have confidence at a time when I didn't." And so through natural experience, we had that. But I think over time, it has become an evidence-based practice. And I don't know if you'd like me to talk about kind of the National Institute of Health and some of the studies that they have done over the years, or?
Yeah, I think that'd be great, because I think, kind of in the modern era of prevention, there's an emphasis on evidence-based interventions. And I'm curious as to whether or not, in the work that you're doing, is there evidence for it? Is there promising practice that art actually has an impact or a protective factor when it comes to behavioral health?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are numerous studies that have been done over time. Cox and Price in 1990, Allen 1985, Harms and Moore, Johnson 1990. I won't go into all of the details, but numerous studies that have been done at the National Institute of Health. And what they came up with conclusively is that the arts build self-esteem and a support system. They help us to communicate feelings in a positive and safe way. They allow us to overcome adversity and cope in a healthy way, which I'm sure some of your listeners, being in prevention or understanding prevention, knows that adverse childhood experiences or any form of trauma is one of the main reasons why youth use substances or commit suicide or have issues in the future. And so what can we do as alternatives? And the arts really have come to the forefront of overcoming adversity and helping people to cope in a way that is healthy. It gives people an outlet for stress, anxiety, and depression. And we are in a mental health crisis right now. I don't think there's anybody who would not agree with that. Allows for objectivity and conversation, creates affirmation within and from those around us, and gives us a healthy alternative for engagement. And these are all conclusive statements from the National Institute of Health.
So your
So
your statement that you're saying there, though, you're saying that it offers an opportunity for inclusion. So
yes.
immediately I think, well, it's a protective factor, but it also is building community. I mean, it's not just an individual reaction to engaging in the arts. I mean, it can bring a community together around a common activity or a common project.
Absolutely, and that kind of transitions into one project that we started. We did it in Jefferson City as well, but I also did it in Maine. One of the first things I did, because there were two communities that were very separate, and the school was not really as engaged as they could with all the different classes. And so we developed a large art mural, and it was actually the design was from two Jefferson City ladies as well, Lucia Kinchelow and Joyce Nineswander. And we went school to school, involved over 600 youth just to color on this drug-free message, huge mural. And then that mural would bounce around town afterwards, and we do kind of a Where's Waldo through social media, like where's it going to show up next? It's at the movie theater. Oh, maybe it's at town hall. And kids would just be thrilled to see this mural wherever it is that it showed up, and knowing that they had a part of it. And it didn't matter whether you were good or bad, an artist or not, it just brought kids together. And even when they were creating the mural, they had to be in groups, they had to ask for colors, they had to engage. And so it definitely fostered a whole teen community feel to that. And we do it with lots of other projects. There's one called the Puzzle Project. We like to bring in people who have a story. And so I brought in this guy named Glenn Simpson. He was in 9 years of recovery. Very interesting. He was a music producer, so the kids just thought he was ultra cool. But I brought him to the alternative high school, and he developed a project called the Puzzle Piece Project. And they were large, oversized pieces of puzzle that you could collage on and express yourself that way. And he had used it with the recovery community to connect those in recovery together. And then he would use it as a traveling exhibit. But what we did is we had youth work on the puzzle pieces with the whole theme of resiliency and hope. And so once all those puzzle pieces were done, we had that all put together. We hung it in the high school, the middle schools, with a understanding underneath that this is all of us connected together with hope and resiliency, because this was particularly right after COVID, and kids felt very beaten down, very isolated. And there's a lot that needs to be done with that.
Well, and I know for those that are listening, you have a whole presentation. You've probably delivered this a lot more places than I'm aware of, but I know you've presented at CADCA before, and you have a lot of different examples in there. And I thought maybe we could talk about some of those. One of them that I've shared with several people since I learned about it was you did a project around doing it. Was it just a song, a hip hop song, or was it like a whole like an EP or an album? And you even did like cover art. Is
Yeah,
Tell us
yeah,
a little
that's
bit
so
about that.
cool. Actually, he was my project coordinator. His name is Nathan Lapointe, and he was a hip hop artist. And I said, "Have you ever worked with youth?" And he's like, "Nah, no, not really." And I said, "Because I've got these alternative high school kids. I don't think they want to do theater. So would you come in and do hip hop?" And he was amazing. He came in and worked with them, and their theme was perseverance, patience, whatever. I wish I could do the rap the way he did it. It was just amazing. And he broke them into groups, and they each did different parts of it. And then we paid for a professional studio, and we went in and filmed, or did the audio filming of their rap song. And then we were able to like play it throughout the school and different engaged functions. And so the kids just thought that was amazing. And when we
Yeah.
talk about direct results, the principal there said, "Wow," he goes, "this is one of the best projects we've ever seen here. These are kids that don't want to come to school. They come from usually substance misuse households. They feel indifferent, they feel depressed, they feel hopeless, and they were thrilled to come to school every day." So that's when you know it works, right? Evidence-based or not, that's when
Right.
you see the direct results.
Right. If you can get them engaged in school and engaged with one another, because obviously they're not all going to have the same background, but they might have an interest in, whether it's a hip hop project or you talked about like the puzzle project, it may bring people together that wouldn't normally, socialize with one another or be in those when you're in school in those cliques, if you will. So that's really kind of
Absolutely.
cool. You
Yeah.
also had mentioned in your presentation you did a project, I believe, with your son around like some chalk art or
Oh
something
yeah.
along those lines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, it was the alternative high school. And when you're with kids who are hugely beaten down, they don't really want you to sugarcoat a lot. They really want to just talk normally about some of the challenges they have. And so I wanted to work with them with art. And so I brought in a presentation on Van Gogh, because as depressing as it is, he is an artist who really, really struggled with anxiety and depression, as we know, and took his own life. And so I talked a lot about him and his past and how he'd grown up and how he felt as an individual and what led to what, but that the only place he could truly immerse himself in was art. And then we showed many examples of how he did that through light and dark and examples of how he felt on that particular day based on the fact that he had dark trees that were always in the way of the bright future that was down below, and starry, starry night has swirls and swirls, but it still has darkness. So we talked about how he did all of that. And the kids were really fascinated with that. And then we had them do their own art. So we played Starry, Starry Night, and the kids would do a rendition of sunflowers. And again, we were like, no wrong or right. There's no talent involved here. It's whatever you want to do. And then after they were done, we asked, and the reason why you mentioned my son is he too struggles with anxiety, and he's just a brilliant little artist, and he's always used art to help him cope and just to express. And so I showed a bunch of his art, and he came in and talked to the youth at one point too. And I think it just makes them feel like they're not alone and that everybody struggles and that this is a really healthy, safe place to express whatever it is that you want because there is no right or wrong and it purges the way you feel. So they made their own sunflowers. And then just to extend the project, we decided we'll take those sunflower pictures and now we'll do chalk art. And in fact, Jefferson City does a really cool job with a jazz fest that was affiliated with chalk art. And I kind of pulled those skills from there. But that was just another way to involve them. You just want to continually involve them. And the journaling, when we finished the project, we said, okay, how did it feel to purge those feelings? How did it feel when you look at your own painting? What does it feel like to hear other people's opinion of your painting? So we got them to write a lot too, because you and I were just talking about this, Steve, but we're losing the tactile parts of our world, particularly with social media, which is one of the worst addictions that we can talk about for young minds right now. It's really manipulating how they identify and all sorts of different things. However, we're losing that tactile need to write and to scrape and to touch and to create and to see. And so that's what art does. It brings it back. Our brain uses different parts of our brains to physically pick up something and write with it than it does to type on something or just to look at something. And so we think that art is a good way to bring all that back as well. And then we
Well,
did bring in a professional music band, a jazz band who had worked with Bonnie Raitt and some pretty cool players. And they came in and worked with kids on what they come up with in terms of lyrics and creating expression through their music. We did do dance, but it was during COVID, so it was online. We'll recreate that one, but dance is also another great way to immerse yourself in the arts. And then the last project we did pretty recently is film. So we have kids do a PSA contest anyhow, and so they get to express themselves that way. But my son and I produced a film called Compassion Cures, Building Hope, building hope by reducing stigma, because I don't know what's going on in your markets, but here we have a real problem with people feeling compassion towards those with substance misuse disorder and mental health and not understanding that they are diseases that need to be treated with as much compassion as diabetes and heart disease. And so we put together a half-hour documentary, and we were able to like pull together the voices, collective voices from the state. So the director of our opiate response and two women who had lost children to opiate overdoses, and people in recovery, and people in prevention, and those in the hospital that are doing medication assisted treatment, and those who train people on Narcan. So we pulled together every nook and cranny that you could imagine to represent voices of why we need to overcome stigma when it comes to substance misuse disorder. And that has been I say, an art form that has really gone gangbusters. I mean, we have coalitions nationwide that are using it. I presented it at CADCA this past year. We're part of opiate summits. We're part of a film festival this coming weekend in Portland called the Real Film Festival. It's for people in recovery, and we will be playing it on Sunday. And our colleges are embracing it because a lot of pharmacy students and kids who are going into medicine need to understand stigma. They need to learn it just as much as anything else that they're learning. And then hospitals, a lot of the people that we talked to in recovery said that when they went to medical care, the medical staff were not very warm and compassionate when it came to understanding their condition. So it needs to get in every nook and cranny, and we would love to come to Jeff City at some point too. So you may see us there. We're working with a group at the Capital City Cinema in Jefferson City to maybe bring the movie there as well.
You know, you made the comment when you were talking about some of the projects that you've done that, like with art, as for instance, you said it's an individual thing. It's almost like you can't do it wrong. The wrong is you just didn't do it. To express yourself in whatever these mediums are, that's a real. That's the saving grace of it all. Is if you can capture your own spirit and project it, whether it's hip hop recording or whether it's journaling or whether it's chalk art on the sidewalk or being a
Yeah.
part of a video. It's really about bringing forth the individual's capacity to express themselves in whatever form, and you really can't do it wrong. It's just get started and do it. And I think that's interesting because you're giving a lot of really interesting ideas as far as things that people could challenge their own communities to do or learn more from. So there's one thing that I know that you and I've talked about before, but I'd like to spend some time talking about it. You talked about the theater aspect, but you've done some work around like doing improvisation or doing monologues. And how did you get the youth engaged in that, and what was that like? Because that, speaking in public is not a lot of people's favorite thing to do. How did you get them to really become improvisational and stand up and deliver a monologue?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because that's been one of our best efforts, I think. I'm actually on the side with an organization called Acorn Productions. It's a very good theater group here in Portland. And I'm their education director. And we were, they do a lot of playwrights, like teaching youth how to be playwrights. And so we said, what about monologues? Like, what are we going to do with middle school? They really need something. And so the writing part became the monologue, but we knew that in order to present it, it would be a theater, writing program. And this particular program we offer to schools. It was completely funded, and we would get groups of like 20 to 25 kids. Usually high need. I don't think there was one group that I have had so far that didn't come in beaten down from isolation, mental health issues, coming from bad divorce situations. One girl had lost her father to an overdose that year. Lots of them, no matter what school you went to, dealing with pressure and anxiety and identity crises. I just was overwhelmed that it didn't matter where we went. And it didn't matter what type of youth we were working with, they all were struggling. And so at the very beginning, they were almost like, this is very uncomfortable. We don't know why we're here. We don't really have any friends. We don't know how to socialize well. all these other things. And so what we did is we fostered conversations, and we said, we're here for theater, but more than anything, we're here to talk about how do we cope when we're dealing with stress. And so every time we would do improvs, which were just fun, and the kids did a lot of that teen stuff, a lot of that feeling more safe with each other, feeling more confident with each other. When you're uninhibited in front of other people, you then have a bond that you can't explain. And so immediately, within the first 2 days, they started feeling like they were more of a support system for each other. And then we had some pretty serious conversations, just focus grouping and circling up in between the improvs. And then we had them write their monologues, and we based it on hope. And what does joy look like to you? Because we know you have all these challenges, but what does joy look like? And you can't believe the things that these kids would write about. Some were really sad and difficult to read. Others were just fun and upbeat. But we had kids who admitted to suicidal thoughts. We had kids who just felt like they were alone. And for these kids to be strong enough to read them to each other, and then also feel like they're not alone. Like all these kids have very similar strains. It was just powerful, really powerful. And the parents and the administrators afterwards said, we don't know what you did to our children, but they have transformed. And so we get a grant to do 3 schools a year. And so that's what we do. We earmark schools that are really in high need.
Now, when you mentioned, referred to them as kids, now are you talking all age groups, elementary, middle school, high school? What's the sweet spot?
I shouldn't call middle schoolers kids. Shame on me. Now, it's 7th through 8th graders, 7th and 8th graders for this particular class. And we do also really follow up with social workers, teachers, everybody, because there's some pretty amazing stuff that surfaces that you'd be surprised. And we don't pretend to be behavioral health specialists, but we do want to make sure that it gets followed up with whatever it is that transpires, and it's usually safe stuff as well.
Right.
But yeah, it's kind of eye-opening to all of us who've been involved with this project.
That's a really powerful testimonial that you can get a group of at-risk students to stand up and kind of claim how they really feel or what they're really thinking in front of their peers. I can see that on the other side of that, it could be very transformative for anyone that has the courage to engage in something like that.
Yeah, and we really foster that this is a safe space and nothing goes beyond here. And they only present to who they want to present to. They don't have to present if they don't want to present at all. But what's funny is we've had groups where like 10 of the 15 say, yeah, we're gonna present, and the 5 that didn't want to present end up presenting, and all the other kids cheer them on. And by the time they're done, they're just so empowered. I mean, you can just see the transformation in these kids. I always get a little verklempt, I have to talk amongst yourselves for a second, because it's one of the most touching things I have the honor to be doing with youth.
One of the things that comes to mind when you talk about this is you're really serving in one part of this equation, and they're getting the opportunity to fulfill the other side of it. I'm a big fan of the 40 developmental assets from the Search Institute, and one of the things I've seen this in other venues as well. But one of the things they say is most important in the development of a child's life is to know that there's a non-parental adult that cares about them, and you're serving that role and giving them an opportunity to engage in such a way. But the other part is that I would be hard pressed to find somebody that doesn't want to be heard for who they are. Yeah. And you're giving them a chance to do that. So it's like they're waiting for someone to say, okay, here's your chance to be heard. But at the same time, it sounds like your efforts are allowing them to have the space where that can happen. You're making it a safe space. You're saying, I'm also an adult that wants to hear what it is that you have to say. You're not just saying it to the wall or, saying it in your bedroom. You're saying it out loud, and I'm here and I'm listening to what you have to say. And that's very powerful, especially when you're talking about middle school, 13, 14-year-olds.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a transitional time in their lives. And we also, encourage that parents come if the kids want them to. And you'd be amazed to just how eye-opening it is for the parents. Who are like, oh, I had no idea that's how she felt or he felt. And what's really cool is these groups go on. Like I remember one we did in Windham, which is on the outskirts of Portland, and it was right before school started. It was an August camp. And they were really scared about going back to school because they felt disconnected to everything and everybody. And that group that was in that program stayed together the whole year. So they went into school with a support system of somebody who's going to affirm me. And you hit it on the head, Steve. Like affirmation, it just allows anybody to blossom. Adults need it too. But these kids just seem like they don't understand that it's okay to be affirmed. And when you're up on stage and you've shared your own words and you get applause and people are, yeehawing,
Yeah,
um, wow, they
hard to
just
deny that.
feel so affirmed. Yeah, like, wow, that's me. That's me that they're applauding. And it's very cool.
You're listening to Prevention Perk. Art is not only a protective factor, but it's a great community builder and gateway to collaboration. Interested in learning more about the use of art in prevention? You can follow Be the Influence on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, or visit their website at betheinfluencewrw.org. Learn more today. Well, you're a part of Be the Influence. I mean, that's the title of your drug-free community program, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure we'll put connection, both your email and your website in our show notes in case people want to make that connection with you and learn more about what you're doing.
Yeah.
Maybe have you as a guest to present your presentation for a project that they have going on. But as we start to wrap this up, I always have one question. Is there something that we haven't talked about that you really feel like the audience really needs to know about this? Or is there maybe a challenge that you would have for the audience to do paying it forward?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in it takes a village and the village is you. So you can come up with great information and great ideas, but if you don't do it, it means nothing. So I mean, I really foster like spread it. And one person that you affect is huge. So you think you're not making a difference, but if you can, as a parent, as an educator, as just another person who reaches out to somebody else, like you said it, one adult caring about a child is all they really need. That's so easy. Why don't we do that? Or if it's a bullying situation and somebody lends you a hand. I remember this story from Kansas City. True story. When I was living in Missouri, and this young boy was walking home and he was thinking of taking his life. And he wasn't popular and he'd been bullied for many years and he just didn't consider himself much of anything. And he was walking home and he dropped his backpack, and some football player or popular kid from the school saw that he dropped it, lifted it up and said, "Hey, buddy, you dropped this." And the kid, that one action changed the trajectory of him going home and taking his own life. So this is not hard, y'all. We just have to do it. And that's part of my like compassion cures is like we just have to treat people with compassion and affirm them, and say nice things to people. Force yourself 3 times a day, say nice things to people. But I also, and I'm bringing this up, it's not the popular topic of the day, but one of the reasons why we're in a mental health crisis is the use of cannabis, and we need to do something about that. And we need to realize that it is not an innocent drug, and it is not healthy and natural. It has consequences like any other drug, and one of them is severe mental health issues. We are seeing it, tsunami of them in my field. I see it day in and day out. Social workers are saying that kids are hearing voices. It is because of the concentration, and it's because the world believes it not to be harmful, and so kids believe it not to be harmful. But I'm telling you, it's harmful. So that would be that'd be my soapbox if we want to really help this generation through mental health and feeding their souls.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that comment, especially about the dangers of the use of marijuana, and especially around the developing mind. And of course, middle school students are right smack in the middle of that, beginning to know who they are and learn who they are, and the work that you're doing is a good antidote for that, for a mental health outlet. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, you're welcome. Thanks. I'm so glad that you could join us on the perk. We'll make sure everybody gets connected to you, and we'll give your email address and your website into the show notes, as I said, and maybe we'll have you back again to do something further for us for Mid-America PTTC.
That would be great. And Steve, see, it takes a village, and the village is you. Look what you're doing. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for listening to Prevention Perk, a podcast from Mid-America PTTC. To learn more about our innovations, please visit pttcnetwork.org and look under Your PTTC for the Mid-America link. Remember, prevention is better together, and together we are stronger.